question is, how does this work relative to the way things we were doing before? Are they learning it? Is there, hands-on involvement in, getting into these companies and, uh, 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 having a guy like David Sachs, sort of there in the White House and having his people, or having people like Peter Thiel and Mark Andreessen so close to the president, is that helping U.S. competitiveness and AI development?
It's helping a few in U.S. competitiveness and AI development. I mean, it really is, the challenge about this, the moment, and about the Trump AI policy is that it's picking winners and losers in ways that we say that we don't in a free market. And so the proximity of leading figures from Silicon Valley, from the VC space and the tech development space, means that they are getting larger shares of this market, and for themselves. And you said, the president is I think, what did you say? Something, the framing like a AI stock buyer or something.
Yeah.
I think the United States, the country, the American public is now also put in the position of being an AI stock buyer, but the president gets to be the stock picker, and those around him. And so I think, it's just been interesting to watch the conversation change. David, you'll remember, 10 months ago, 12 months ago, people like Mark Andreessen were lamenting the fact that there was being quick market consolidation in the AI space, and what to do about little tech, what to do about the small startups, the small, VC projects that people were trying to spin up to diversify the ecosystem. But now that pendulum has swung, and, to the extent that you can get a startup, you've now got this pathway now for M&A, for mergers and acquisitions, that you maybe didn't have before. And so people are less worried about having, I think, tangible, healthy, small tech ecosystem, and, much more concerned or much more focused on having the company stand up just enough so you can acquire them and sort of move M&A.
Yeah, which, by the way, and I say this with some degree of confidence, is being less regulated and less
Yes.
policed than
Yes.
it was in the past.
Yes. Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
in terms of stimulating innovation in the United States, in terms of the competitive environment, they talk a lot about it. To the president himself, well, this is a very hot thing. AI is very hot. We're investing in it. Um, uh, but there is some question as to whether it's actually working. It's some question about whether, well, some policies that are carryover from Biden policies, like restricting the sale of chips, is actually helping. And a week ago, we had the Chinese announce their 5-year plan.
Mm-hmm.
And the centerpiece of the Chinese 5-year plan was technological independence. It was kind of like, well, we're not going to be dependent on your chips. We are not going to be dependent on you in all these ways. And I'm just wondering, should we be rethinking this idea of, sort of heavy export controls and so forth, and acknowledging that competition is sort of getting ahead of our ability to regulate it?
Yeah, I mean, I think in any instance, even not just for semiconductor chips, that export controls as a tool of governance or to shape markets is only also, ultimately adding friction. It's never a stop. It's a sort of temporary stopgap. It doesn't often sort of completely, transform the entire market. So I think that and I think that the Biden administration certainly went into export controls around chips, I think, understanding that, to be clear, because that's just widely known. I would say, I think what was unanticipated is, and then I think this is how we need to sort of reframe how we think about innovation. What was unanticipated is the fact that the constraint, to the extent that the export controls did create sort of constraint and barriers to Chinese R&D or Chinese developers working more freely, the constraint actually was a source of innovation. And so this was that DeepSeek moment that we had a few months ago when it's, from what we know, it seems clear that there was, less compute, less energy. You don't need those chips. You might be able to use other kinds of chips. So the constraint is also creating, unwittingly, an ecosystem that's much more diversified, much less dependent on these particular chips, and arguably much more innovative. And so, I think that's going to continue to be the sort of back and forth with this. And if you don't have an answer for that, I think export controls are not going to work at all.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I think another part of this is, I don't know. So maybe it's a predisposition among some Americans to say, "Well, we are innovative. The rest of the world, we're this is our special sauce. We are very good innovators." But the reality is, the rest of the world has always been good innovators, and
Yeah.
the Chinese, the people I talk to with AI are like in China are like, no, in some areas they're ahead of us.
Yeah, I think listen, not having, I mean, you can think of lots of, I think, examples that have nothing to do with technology. When people have less, they're able to figure out a way out of no way, right? Which is a phrase kind of out of the African American tradition. So that's just true, and I think we're creating these pockets of innovation by trying to constrain the hardware. So yes, I would also say that when you think about the sort of broader universe of AI, generative AI and large language models in the large universe are just a small piece of that. I mean, it's hard to imagine because they're the hugest piece in the kind of market ecosystem. But if you're talking about just the technology itself, so we're also, I think, risking in the United States by focusing on this market that really emerges out of the United States and focusing on this one particular small aspect of AI and machine learning, all of the kind of innovation and other types of AI that might be being, developed and done. And so my worry is, yes, the United States, people in the United States have a track record of being deeply innovative, but we're also isolating our activity to a kind of one small domain, and that one small domain is also mostly kind of research and development being done by companies. And so, I think in China, the ecosystem is a bit more diversified. People are working or, throwing a lot more things at the wall. I think there should be some concern if we're worried about American innovation and this sort of race with China, about, how diversified our stakes are here.
Yeah, I mean, just to go back to your original point and to show that I'm listening and that there are these kind of forms of regulatory intervention which are that are not labeled that way. Um, and two of them that strike me as relevant on this is kind of the war on science, where we're sort of going against science funding, going against grants, and so on and so forth. And another one is the war on foreign students coming to the United States, but to study, or just the inability to give visas to people. And that if we want to innovate, isn't that like a direct shot at two of the big engines of innovation?
I 100% there. I agree. I won't disagree with you at all,
Oh,
David.
God, we're almost 20 minutes in. Finally, I got it. Oh yeah.
No, I mean, so this is what's so, I think, troubling and also inconsistent. And I think the messaging around the Trump administration, which, trumpets, wanting to sort of just drive and lead and dominate, right? Supremacy, right? Technology supremacy. And also, have gold standard science, the best in the world. So I would be the first to say, in my time in government, I came as a reformer. I understood that there were things that we were doing in science and technology policy that we could be doing better. So I don't come to the questions that you raise with a perspective like, keep everything the way it was. The status quo is amazing. There's certainly things that could change. But what we need to do to lead in this space, obviously, is to continue to be the world's leader as we have been in scientific research and development. I mean, the entire ecosystem that we have right now comes out of this, not only in universities, but also in government research. And to the extent that we are, I mean, we don't have a budget right now, so we don't know what exactly is going to happen. But what was proposed in the president's budget were diabolical. I mean, were just devastating cuts, more than 50% in some instances, between 40 and 60% to the science and research ecosystem. The ecosystem that gave us chips, that gave us, the internet, that gave us the iPhone, all of the things that the AI technologies of this moment are building upon, this foundation. And to sort of rip away that foundation just seems completely just short-sighted. And again, this is what, to go back to where we were talking before, there is a discourse, a language that is spoken about, commitments to science and technology. And then, I think some practices that don't support that.
When you look back at the Biden administration, what's your critique of that?
Oh, gosh. I mean, I think, we could have done a lot more to engage the public around science and technology. So if you think about what's happening now around public health and the way that vaccine distrust has sort of spun out in the public sphere, I think we could have certainly been better at engaging the public, being accountable to the public, really listening, and not, always saying the experts are, completely right and just, be quiet. We don't have anything for, there's nothing for you to say here. I'm spinning up a project with my colleague, Jenny Reardon, called The Public Science, which is trying to think about exactly this question. How do we learn from not just the last 5 years or 10 years, but even the last 80 years in which we created the science and technology policy ecosystem that we have now in the United States, and what might we do better? So we're early stage and we have more questions than answers, but I think certainly having much more public accountability, much more public messaging about the work that we're doing. I think we didn't, do ourselves any favors by being involved in, what turned out to be kind of two military struggles that are still intractable and ongoing. I think we didn't say quite enough about the big pieces of historic legislation that were passed that had everything to do with AI, the Chips and Science Act, things that enabled more broadband, to have more people to have more access to technology more generally. So there's a few, but there's a big long list.
Well, there are some people out there, who are trying to influence the course of things forward. And I saw that you had written something about an initiative that basically had as its core goal how to help America advance faster on all of this, and 10 times faster. And
yeah.
This podcast is underwritten in part by the U.S. Embassy of the United Arab Emirates. Its editorial content is completely independent, and the views expressed are exclusively those of participating experts. It is presented live, without editing. For further information about the UAE's efforts in the areas of artificial intelligence and technology, go to the website of the embassy at www.uae-embassy.org and search for UAE-US Tech Cooperation. We thank them for their support. We thank everybody who's supporting this podcast for their support, and we look forward to it developing and growing over time because the issue is so important.